recording, start whenever.
Awkward, mate. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I will be reviewing And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. I paused to let the intro play. And yes, I did look up her name because she's a booktuber like myself, so I watched some of her videos to hear her pronounce it to make sure that I didn't mess it up. So what I'm going to do for this review is I'm going to do the first little bit spoiler free in case you want to read it, and I'll explain the plot line and some of the characters. And then after that, if you want to read the book, please click off the video and I'll let you know when, and that's when I'll start giving spoilers. So from my research, I think that this author only has 2 books, and it's this one and The Dead House, which she wrote first. They're not related to each other, but they're very similar just in the way that they're creepy as you know what. And I read The Dead House first. I probably read it earlier last year and I really liked it. So I was excited to read this one and it was really good. It did hold up to my expectations, and on Goodreads I rated it 5 stars, which I don't normally do, but it's one that I enjoyed reading and would recommend to people and would probably even read again. So yeah, that doesn't normally happen. So as much as this is called And the Trees Crept in this continent, in the UK, I will say if you're from there and you're watching these videos, it is called The Creeper Man there, and it's going to be a different cover than that one, so I'd probably recommend looking it up by author and not by the title, because if you're interested in this book, you won't find it. So the plot of this book, for those of you who don't know it, it's 2 sisters and they escape from their abusive parents to their aunt's place in the middle of the woods, basically, and they think of it as their safe haven. It's where their mother grew up, it's her childhood home. It starts going well, but very quickly it's obvious that things are not what they appear to be. They go visit their aunt to live with her, and a couple months in they realize she's crazy. All of a sudden their safe haven is like not safe at all. That's basically like the prologue of the book, and there's a big time jump. It's about 3 years. The town has been abandoned because people think that World War III is coming. This takes place pretty present day. You're watching them struggle, and after a while, the older sister begins to think that the trees are literally creeping in, like coming closer to the house. So yeah, there's just a lot of weird things that go on. If you don't like The Haunting of Hill House or The Haunting of Bly Manor, like anything like that, you're probably not going to enjoy this book a whole lot. It's very confusing, but that is done on purpose. As I was reading it, that's what made me want to continue to read it, because I've read a lot of books like this before, just in the way that it's creepy and it's like a thriller, so it makes you think that you know what's going on, but it doesn't really make any sense. And I love getting to the end of these books because everything kind of clicks into place and it's like... The other thing I will give you a warning about, it's very disturbing and graphic at certain points. There is talk of like bugs and mold and rotting food and things, and so if you don't like things like that, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading this book, because there is very vivid descriptions of those things, but that's what makes it creepy, honestly. Like, it does paint a very good visual in your mind. The one other thing that I will say is that it's one of the books that has like special things in it, like there's little notes or things like here, or if you ever read Geronimo Stilton, I loved those books growing up, and they would make the words like different colors and different fonts and things like that to kind of accentuate them. So like this is an example of something that happens later on in the book. Like, it's just cool things like that that make you want to keep reading it. There's also this thing called broken book entry, which the main character, whose name is Scylla, does occasionally. The bolded words are actually like their own message. So if you read them out separately and leave out all the other ones, it'll have like a separate sentence that's kind of hidden in there. So I always think that books like that are really cool. And I will say that The Dead House was kind of similar. So yeah, if you enjoy books like that, I would recommend reading them. And like I said, if you've seen things like Hill House and Bly Manor and you don't like being confused, you just want to know like at the beginning what happens, you don't want to have to wait to the end, this is definitely not the book for you. So if you don't want any spoilers, please click off now, and I will begin my full review of this book.
Spoilers.
Okay, so if you're here,
I'm going to explain literally everything in this book. This is not Janelle's kind of book, so it's okay that I'm spoiling it. Plus, I explained the whole thing to her earlier, because I will say that right off the bat, it is one of those books that, like, I would rant to people about. It takes a lot for me to cry, and I cried reading this, and I had to set it down multiple times. So the full plot of the book, like I said, the aunt does go crazy after they get there. And I will say that's one of the scenes that stuck in my head the most from this book was it's Scylla's birthday. She's turning 14, I think. She might be turning 15. I think she was turning 14. And I just finished it yesterday and I still can't remember. This is why we do the reviews so quickly. Anyways, yeah, so she eats like 3 pieces of her birthday cake and she loves it and she's like so excited. But you can tell that there's like something off. It's talking about how like the aunt's smile is really big, but it doesn't reach her eyes. So already that painted a creepy picture in my head. It made me think of like Momo kind of thing. And it was talking about how like her nail polish was painted really messily and it was like all over her cuticles, like random things like that that make you kind of like, okay, something's not right here. After she had finished her 3rd piece of cake, her little sister came up and was like, oh look, worms. And it was talking about how the worm looked like an uncooked piece of bacon because there was pink all around it, and it turned out that there was worms in the cake. So that's when you kind of know that the aunt, that was like, you didn't have any clue until then that there was something wrong with the aunt, except that it was talking about like her smile and then finding the worms in the cake, and then that was just kind of like, whoa, okay. And so basically after that day, the aunt goes up to the attic and shuts the door and she stays there. So like I said, there's a plot jump. It's about 3 years later. The plot at this point was very confusing. There's just a lot of jumps. You don't really know how much time has passed. The main character oftentimes thinks that she's going crazy, like her aunt is. And that's why it's partially hard to read. It's like she kind of is going crazy, like in her own way. So it's hard to be in the mind of somebody like that and not really understand how they're seeing things or if what they're seeing is true, because what happens a lot in this book is it'll talk about the same scene multiple times, but like the details are different because she's remembering it in different ways and doesn't know which one is true. Again, if you don't like confusing things, you're not gonna like it. After the 3-year time jump, this boy comes out of the woods, and I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's either Gowen or Gowan. Anyways, he comes out of the woods and he's always bringing apples for them. And he leaves and he comes back and he leaves. And it's just strange because the 2 sisters have been alone for like 3 years, and all of a sudden there's this random guy coming from the town that's abandoned. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He comes and he's basically the only other character in the book. It is a 4-character book besides the 2 parents that you hear about occasionally. It's the aunt, whose name is Kath or Kathy. The main character, the narrator's name is Priscilla. She goes by Scylla most of the book though. Her little sister's name is Nori or Eleanor, and then there's Gowen or Gowan, however you pronounce his name. That's basically the only indicator when time passes is the boy coming out of the woods occasionally. So eventually Scylla has decided that the trees are getting closer to the house. The aunt, she's just spent 3 years pacing upstairs in the attic, and it's always talking about the creaking noises that she's making as she's walking back and forth. She's said multiple times you can't leave, like there's the creeper man in the woods that will kill you. You just can't leave, like you're trapped there, which is probably part of the reason she went crazy. And so they're stuck there, and she starts to notice that the trees are slowly getting closer to the house, and as the book goes on, their progress toward the house like speeds up and the roots are moving faster, which is why the book is called And the Trees Crept In. She also starts to figure out about halfway through the book that the house is sinking into the ground. Not only are the trees getting closer, but the house is going down. And it gets to the point, like, cool things you never thought of, like you go into the basement that had little windows and all of a sudden the little windows, it's black down there because like the dirt has risen above the windows because the house is sinking like very rapidly. Eventually at some point they wake up and they're just stuck inside the house. Like the trees have grown up over the windows, they try to cut themselves out and the trees just keep regrowing back. So they basically are trapped there. And that's when the book gets the most confusing. It's even hard to describe because, again, she's crazy, or she thinks she's crazy, and it's all very mixed up. But basically what you find out at the very end is that she was actually dead. So let me back up a little bit because you're sitting there going, what? Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna go back a little bit. What actually happened, she got to the house and this boy was still living there. They say early on that this house used to be an orphanage, and so he was one of Kathy's orphans. When he comes to the house, he says, oh, I used to live here, I used to be an orphan. But what actually happened is when Scylla got to the house, he was still there. He was the last orphan, and him and Scylla fall in love with each other. And like when all these things pass and like when it's her birthday and they're eating cake, he's there. And this is also, it's so confusing to explain. It's not as confusing to read, but basically he's actually there when they find the worms in the cake and all these things. After Kath goes up to the attic, because that does actually happen, he decides to leave because he wants to get help for them. He knows like they're in trouble and they're young and they can't take care of themselves, so he leaves to get some help. At some point, Scylla goes upstairs because she's hearing the creaking noise, and her aunt has actually hung herself in the attic. And the creaking that she's hearing is like the body on the rope swinging back and forth. So she goes back downstairs. Nori, the little sister, goes into the woods and finds a man, and he's all diseased, but she's a sweet little girl. She wants to prove that she's not afraid of him, and they don't have any running water in the house, and so he offers her some water and she drinks it. She's like taking his hand and stuff. She ends up getting whatever he has. She gets really sick, and her older sister does the best that she can to take care of her, but she does end up passing away. When Gowan, or Gowan, however you pronounce his name, returns to the house, he finds them all dead, and he's like absolutely destroyed basically. You find all this out. What you read throughout the book, with the 3 years of the creaking upstairs and the aunt being upstairs and the two of them being alive, basically just wasting away. It was talking about like Scylla's hair falling out, and they were growing mold like on their clothes and things like that. Didn't really make any sense. So it's because they were dead. It was basically her own version of purgatory. So basically she was in hell and she was repeating this life over and over and over again. I mentioned before that she's writing in this thing called a broken book, and it's called like broken book entries. Near the end of the book, they discover this bookshelf, and the diary that she was writing in was pretty significant. It had an omega symbol on the cover, and there was like a gash through the back of it. Like, there's not many other books like it, and there ends up being like 74 or 75 of them on this bookcase, and it's because she's gone through this hell so many times. So eventually she asks Gowan or Gowan, like, why are you here? After you found us, did you kill yourself? And he left the house, he lived his life, he grew up to be an old man, and when he passed away, that's just where he returned to. He returned and helped Scylla get out of the hell that she was in. My biggest problem with this book was just that I didn't like the main character a whole lot, but I feel like that was maybe on purpose. She just didn't have a lot of characteristics. It was definitely more about plotline than it was about developing the characters, which I like a mixture of both, personally. Yeah, plus, I mean, it was confusing because she thought she was going crazy, and a lot of the book was kind of mixed around. At the very, very, very end of the book, we've now reached the end. She has gotten out, and she basically realized that the Creeper Man was herself. It was like another version of herself who was felt so guilt-ridden with things that happened with her parents, and because her sister died on her watch, even though she did everything she could, this Creeper Man was basically like an angry version of herself. So she feeds it food because she's been starving like the whole book. She feeds it food, and the Creeper Man like was this huge tall man, like no eyes, just really creepy smile, and he basically just like sheds away, and it's a version of herself standing there, and that's basically, she's released from her hell. And it shows then they're back in the house, but I mean, it's not in the ground anymore. Everything's the way it used to be. The house is now this gorgeous place again, and her aunt is there, and her little sister is there, and they take hands and they run off into like the mountains, and it's basically, that's supposed to be heaven. They're running off into the light. So now she's there with Gowan, and this is by far my biggest problem with this book, and I didn't realize it. When I was reading it, I felt like something was off, but I didn't realize it until I was ranting to my boyfriend a couple minutes after I finished it. It personally doesn't make any sense to me. She wants another life. That makes sense. She isn't happy with the life that she had. It was a really rough one. She died early on. So she's decided she wants another chance, and she wants another chance with him. She wants them to be in love. and he kind of agrees he wants another life, which I thought was interesting given that he lived for like 90 years, but that's okay. And yeah, they basically both decide that they want to be reincarnated, I guess, because she said like, I want another chance at life, and he says, me too, but it's risky because we may not find each other. And she says like, oh, I'll know, like I'll fly across continents for you. And he says, okay, let's give it a shot. And then the last sentence is something about like, and then we both disappeared. So basically they were both reincarnated, and then they're gonna try to find each other again in this new life of theirs. I found that so out of character for her. This entire book, the only person she's cared about is her little sister. I understand now her little sister's with the aunt, like I get all that, but this little sister goes off to heaven and she decides, okay, now she's over there, that's fine, I want to have another life. Which, good for her, I know that she's been a caretaker her whole life, but I thought it was strange that she wouldn't want to be with her sister or go with her sister. Not that they really say what happens after they go off, maybe they know on the inside that it just ends for them, but I just thought that it was so strange that she chose to leave her little sister in order to be with this boy, compared to the sister that she walked miles and miles to the aunt's house, and when she died in the bed, killed herself because she couldn't bear to be without this sister and have all that guilt, even though she knew that this boy was coming back, yet she chose to leave her sister to go off to heaven by herself and have another life with this boy. So that, personally, I felt was out of character. I understand trying to wrap up like the romantic ending and give Scylla a better life than she had, but yeah, I personally didn't like that choice a whole lot. I think that that's it for my review of this book. I know it was very confusing, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but like I said, if you're one of those people who doesn't care about spoilers, I still do think that this book is worth a read. There's many little twists and turns that I didn't mention. It's very creepy. If you like scary books, like, that is the one for you. Yeah, I think that that's it for my second review on this channel. If you like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and leave down in the comments more books that you would like me to review, or if you have any questions about that book. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.